Rescuers found this dog chained and dying. But 6 months later, I can't stop crying. The rain fell steadily on that cold October morning when Sarah Mitchell received the call. As the founder of Second Chance Animal Rescue, she was used to disturbing reports, but something in the caller's voice made her heart sink. "There's a white dog. I've never seen anything like it," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "He's behind the old Wilson property. I don't think he'll make it through another night." Sarah grabbed her emergency kit and signaled to Mike, their veteran rescue coordinator. Within minutes, they were navigating their rescue van through the muddy back roads of rural Pennsylvania. The Wilson property came into view, a dilapidated farmhouse with broken windows and overgrown weeds. Behind it, partially hidden by rusty farm equipment, they spotted what looked like a pile of dirty rags. But it wasn't rags. "Oh my God!" Sarah breathed, approaching slowly. What they thought was dirt was actually matted, infected fur. Underneath was a Samoyed dog, once magnificent and white, now nearly unrecognizable. The dog lifted his head slightly at their approach, revealing deep, infected gashes around his neck where a heavy chain had cut into his flesh. His eyes, though clouded with pain, held something that broke Sarah's heart: hope. "Hey there, sweet boy," Sarah cooed, keeping her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "We're here to help you." Mike carefully approached with bolt cutters to free the chain. The dog, whom they would later name Duke, didn't flinch or growl. He seemed to understand they were there to help. Just then, a voice rang out from the house. "That's my dog. You can't take him." A disheveled man stormed toward them, reeking of alcohol. "He's my property. I paid good money for him." Sarah stood her ground. "Sir, this dog is in critical condition. By law, we can remove him if dash." "I want $500. The man interrupted. "Then you can have him." Mike stepped forward, his imposing frame blocking the man's path. "Sir, we've already called the authorities. They're on their way. You can either let us take him now, or you can explain to them why this dog is in this condition." The standoff lasted several tense minutes before the man spat on the ground and turned away. Take the worthless mutt. He was nothing but trouble anyway. With gentle movements, Sarah and Mike lifted Duke onto a blanket. He weighed far less than a healthy Samoyed should, and every touch revealed new wounds under his matted fur. "Stay with us, buddy," Sarah whispered as they carefully placed him in the van. "The worst is over now." But as they rushed toward the emergency veterinary hospital, Sarah knew the real battle was just beginning. Duke's physical wounds were severe, but the emotional scars of such betrayal often ran much deeper. In the back of the van, Duke's tail moved slightly, just a tiny wag, but in that moment, it felt like a promise. The emergency veterinary team was waiting when they arrived. Dr. Emily Chun, a specialist in trauma cases, took one look at Duke and immediately began issuing orders. "Get me warm fluids started, blood work panel, and prepare the treatment room," she commanded, her calm voice masking the urgency of the situation. "Sarah, tell me everything you know." As the team worked, Duke remained eerily still, his eyes following their movements. Despite his condition, he didn't resist when they started the or began the painful process of examining his wounds. "I've never seen a dog this severely neglected who's still this gentle," Dr. Chun remarked, carefully documenting each injury for the police report. "His temperature is dangerously low, and these infections are severe, but look at this." She gestured to Duke's tail, which would thump weakly whenever someone spoke kindly to him. "He hasn't given up," Sarah said softly, stroking the small patch of clean fur they'd managed to clear on his head. "He's fighting." The initial examination revealed the full extent of Duke's condition. Severe malnutrition, multiple infected wounds, heartworm disease, and skin infections so severe that most of his fur would need to be shaved. But perhaps most heartbreaking were his paw pads, raw and bleeding from standing on harsh chains for so long. "The next 48 hours are critical," Dr. Chun explained. "We'll start him on broad-spectrum antibiotics and pain management. The infections are our biggest concern right now." Sarah settled in for a long night, refusing to leave Duke's side. She'd seen many rescue cases, but something about this gentle giant touched her deeply. As midnight approached, she read to him softly from a book she kept in her rescue kit. "The Little Prince," she told him. "It's about love and friendship. I think you'll like it." Around 2 a.m., Duke lifted his head and, for the first time, actively sought out Sarah's hand with his nose. The simple gesture brought tears to her eyes. "That's it, sweet boy," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Over the next few days, a remarkable transformation began. As the medications took effect and the wounds were carefully cleaned, glimpses of Duke's true personality emerged. Despite everything humans had done to him, he greeted each staff member with a gentle tail wag. The vet techs fell in love with him, taking turns sitting with him during their breaks. They discovered he had a particular fondness for soft classical music, which seemed to help him relax during treatments. One young tech, Maria, even brought in her laptop to show Duke videos of other Samoyeds playing in the snow. His ears would perk up at their barking, and sometimes he'd make tiny woo-woo sounds in response. A week into his treatment, they attempted his first real bath. It took 3 hours of patient work with special medicated shampoo to begin addressing years of neglect. Throughout it all, Duke stood quietly, occasionally turning to give his caretakers grateful licks. "Look at this," Dr. Chan said during his checkup, pointing to his chart. "His blood values are already improving. He's not out of the woods, but he's fighting hard." Sarah posted updates about Duke on the rescue's social media page, and the response was overwhelming. People from around the world sent messages of support, donations for his care, and even soft blankets for his recovery bed. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave for the night, something extraordinary happened. Duke, who had barely been able to stand when they found him, carefully rose to his feet. Though wobbly, he took 3 steps toward her and gently pressed his head against her leg. The night staff found them like that hours later, Sarah sitting on the floor, Duke's head in her lap, both sound asleep. In his medical chart, the overnight vet wrote simply, "Patient showed first signs of trusting human contact. Progress exceeds expectations." But even as Duke's body began to heal, Sarah knew the journey ahead would be challenging. Physical recovery was just the first step. The real test would be helping this gentle soul learn to trust again, to play again, to be the dog he was always meant to be. As if reading her thoughts, Duke looked up at her with eyes that were clearer now, more focused. In them, she saw not just pain and survival, but something more powerful, the beginning of hope. As Duke's physical condition improved, the real work of emotional healing began. After 3 weeks of intensive medical care, Dr. Chan cleared him for transfer to Second Chance's Rehabilitation Facility, a peaceful 10-acre property specifically designed for traumatized dogs. "Remember," Dr. Chin cautioned as they prepared for the move. "His body is healing faster than his spirit might be. Take it slow." Sarah had prepared a special room for Duke in the facility's indoor recovery wing. The space featured soft lighting, heated floors, and classical music playing quietly. All the comforts they discovered helped keep him calm at the hospital. What no one expected was Duke's reaction to seeing the other rescued dogs. On his first day at the facility, as they walked past the outdoor play yards, his entire demeanor changed. The sight of other dogs happily playing made his tail wag with more energy than they'd ever seen. "Look at that," Mike remarked, watching Duke's eyes track a golden retriever chasing a ball. He remembers what it means to be a dog. They started small, short, supervised interactions with Lily, a gentle senior lab who specialized in helping traumatized newcomers adjust. Duke's first playbow was cause for celebration among the entire staff. "It's like watching a flower bloom in slow motion," Sarah wrote in Duke's progress journal. "Every day, another petal opens." The transformation continued steadily. Duke discovered the joy of soft toys, showing particular fondness for a squeaky polar bear that he carried everywhere. He learned that mealtimes were regular and plentiful, though he still needed reassurance that the food wouldn't be taken away. One milestone came unexpectedly during a spring rain shower. While many of their rescued dogs sought shelter, Duke stood in the gentle rain, lifting his face to the sky. For the first time, they heard him bark, not in fear or pain, but in pure joy. "He's singing," Maria said, wiping tears from her eyes as she filmed the moment. The video would later go viral, touching hearts worldwide. The physical changes were equally remarkable. His coat, now fully regrown, gleamed white as snow. Regular meals and exercise had restored his muscular frame, and his eyes sparkled with newfound vitality. But perhaps most touching was how Duke began helping other rescued dogs. He seemed to sense which newcomers were most frightened, often lying quietly beside their kennels until they felt brave enough to venture out. "He's paying it forward," Sarah observed, watching Duke gently encourage a terrified poodle mix to take treats from a staff member's hand. 6 months after his rescue, Duke had become the unofficial ambassador of Second Chance. His gentle nature and remarkable recovery inspired countless supporters and potential adopters. But Sarah knew finding the perfect home for Duke would require something special. That's when the Hendersons visited the sanctuary. Tom and Claire Henderson weren't looking for a show dog or a guard dog. They were looking for a companion for their daughter Emma, who was recovering from a serious illness that had left her withdrawn and anxious. The moment Duke met Emma, something magical happened. The 12-year-old girl, who had barely spoken during their visit, knelt down to Duke's level. Without hesitation, he placed his big, fluffy head in her lap and sighed contentedly. "Mom," Emma whispered, her first spontaneous words in months. He knows what it's like to hurt and get better." Claire looked at Tom, tears in her eyes. Sarah held her breath. After everything Duke had been through, could this be his moment? The Henderson family's visit marked the beginning of a carefully planned transition process. Sarah and her team had learned that successful adoptions, especially for traumatized dogs like Duke, required patience and preparation. "We'll start with short visits," Sarah explained to the Hendersons, "then progress to day trips and finally overnight stays. Duke needs to know this change is permanent and safe." Emma's connection with Duke deepened with each visit. She would sit in the sanctuary's garden, reading books aloud while Duke listened attentively. Sometimes, other rescued dogs would join their little story circle, creating what the staff affectionately called Emma's Library Hour. During one memorable visit, Emma brought her art supplies. As she sketched, Duke watched with curious eyes, occasionally nudging her hand as if offering artistic suggestions. The resulting portrait of Duke now hung proudly in the sanctuary's welcome center. "Look at his medical charts," Dr. Chun remarked during Duke's final checkup. "His stress indicators drop significantly when Emma's here. It's like they're healing each other." The day trips to the Henderson home revealed another side of Duke. Their large, fenced backyard featured a small pond, and to everyone's delight, Duke showed a particular fondness for splashing in the shallow water. Typical Samoyed, Tom laughed, watching Duke play in the water. They're snow dogs who think they're part fish. Claire noticed positive changes in Emma too. Her daughter was smiling more, talking more, and even started joining local therapy dog training classes to learn how to work with Duke. "She has a purpose now," Claire confided to Sarah. "They both do." The first overnight stay was approached with some trepidation, but Duke surprised everyone. Instead of showing anxiety about the new environment, he seemed to understand this was different. That night, he chose to sleep on the floor next to Emma's bed, as if he'd been doing it his whole life. 2 weeks later, on a crisp autumn morning exactly 1 year after his rescue, Duke officially went home with the Hendersons. The sanctuary staff gathered to say goodbye, many wiping tears as Duke walked confidently to the Hendersons' car, his polar bear toy in his mouth. But this wasn't the end of Duke's story. In many ways, it was just the beginning. Emma and Duke enrolled in therapy dog training together. Their instructor was amazed by Duke's intuitive ability to sense when someone needed comfort. Within 6 months, they were certified as a therapy team. Every Thursday afternoon, they visited the children's ward at the local hospital. Duke, with his gentle nature and fluffy white coat, brought smiles to young patients facing their own battles. Emma would share their story, showing before and after pictures of Duke's transformation. If Duke could get better, she would tell them, so can you. They also made monthly visits to Second Chance, where Duke would help new rescues adjust, showing them by example that trust and love were possible. Sarah noticed that nervous dogs seemed to calm down faster when Duke was present, as if his very presence assured them that everything would be okay. 1 year after his adoption, during a special ceremony at Second Chance, Duke received a new title, Ambassador of Hope. The mayor presented him with a special blue therapy dog vest, embroidered with his name and title. But perhaps the most touching moment came later that evening, when Emma shared a secret with her mother. "You know what, Mom?" she whispered, watching Duke sleep peacefully in his favorite spot by the fireplace. "Sometimes I think Duke didn't just need to be rescued. I think he was sent to rescue all of us." Claire hugged her daughter, looking at the contented white dog who had brought so much healing to their family. "I think you're right, sweetheart. Some angels have 4 paws." 3 years after Duke's adoption, his impact had rippled far beyond the Henderson family. His story, shared through social media and local news, inspired a movement that none of them had anticipated. The Duke's Law campaign began when Emma, now 15, gave a powerful speech at a city council meeting. Standing tall with Duke by her side, she advocated for stricter penalties in animal abuse cases and better funding for rescue organizations. "Duke didn't just survive," she told the silent chamber. "He showed us what forgiveness looks like. But not every dog gets that chance." The council members were moved, particularly when Duke, wearing his therapy vest, made his way around the room, offering comfort and gentle head bumps to everyone present. The local ordinance passed unanimously, setting a precedent that neighboring counties soon followed. Sarah watched these developments with pride, but it was the smaller, everyday miracles that touched her heart most deeply. Like the time Duke sensed an elderly patient's oncoming seizure at the hospital, alerting staff minutes before medical equipment detected any change, or how he would position himself next to children during chemotherapy, letting them bury their faces in his fur during difficult moments. The Hendersons' home became a sanctuary of its own sort. With careful supervision and Duke's guidance, they began fostering other rescued Samoyeds. Duke showed remarkable patience with these traumatized newcomers, teaching them household routines and appropriate play behaviors. "He's like a furry professor," Tom joked, watching Duke demonstrate to a nervous foster dog how to safely navigate the stairs. Claire started a blog documenting their experiences, titled Lessons from Duke. It became a resource for other families adopting traumatized dogs, offering hope and practical advice. The comment section filled with stories of lives touched by Duke's example. One post went viral when Claire shared about Duke's nighttime routine with Emma. Every evening, without fail, he would bring his polar bear toy, the same one from his early days at the sanctuary, to Emma's room. Together, they would read a chapter from The Little Prince, the same book Sarah had read to him during those critical first nights. "It's like he's making sure every scared soul knows there's a happy ending possible," Claire wrote. At the 5-year mark of his rescue, Second Chance organized a special celebration. The event, called Duke's Day, brought together rescue organizations, adopted pets, and families from across the state. Duke, his coat now showing touches of distinguished silver around his muzzle, greeted each guest with his characteristic gentle dignity. During the ceremony, Sarah unveiled a new initiative, the Duke Fund, dedicated to covering medical expenses for severely traumatized rescue dogs. The first recipient was a young Samoyed mix found in conditions similar to Duke's original situation. "Duke didn't just survive," Sarah announced to the gathered crowd. "He showed us that the capacity for love survives even the deepest wounds. He taught us that healing isn't just about mending bodies, it's about restoring faith." Emma, now a confident teenager planning to study veterinary medicine, stood beside Duke as she addressed the gathering. "Someone once asked me if I felt sad about Duke's scars," she said, her hand resting on his head. "But his scars aren't sad. They're proof that love is stronger than cruelty. They're his medals of courage." As if understanding the significance of the moment, Duke lifted his head and let out one of his joyful woo-woo calls, causing laughter and tears among the attendees. Later that evening, As the sun set over the sanctuary grounds, Sarah found Emma and Duke sitting in their favorite spot in the garden. Duke's head rested in Emma's lap as she read from a worn copy of The Little Prince. "Essential things are invisible to the eyes," Emma read softly. "One can only see clearly with the heart." Duke's tail thumped gently against the ground, his eyes half closed in contentment. He was home, he was loved, and his legacy of hope continued to grow, touching lives one paw print at a time. In the years that followed, Duke's story would be shared in schools, hospitals, and rescue organizations around the world. But perhaps his greatest achievement wasn't in the laws he inspired or the funds he helped raise. It was in the simple truth he demonstrated every day, that love, given enough time and patience, can heal even the deepest wounds. For in the end, Duke's journey from chains to charity, from victim to hero, proved that sometimes the most broken beings have the most to teach us about wholeness. His story reminded everyone that second chances aren't just about survival. They're about finding the courage to love again and the strength to help others do the same. 10 years after Duke's rescue, his legacy had grown in ways no one could have imagined. The Duke Fund had helped save over 300 severely traumatized dogs, and Duke's Law had been adopted by states across the country. But it was the personal stories that truly measured his impact. There was Marcus, a 7-year-old autism spectrum child, who spoke his first full sentence while hugging Duke during a therapy session. "Duke understands me," he had said, bringing his mother to tears. There was Officer Jenny Martinez, who started a K-9 rehabilitation program at the local prison after meeting Duke at a community event. The program paired rescued dogs with carefully selected inmates, teaching both humans and canines about redemption and second chances. "These guys see themselves in these dogs' stories," Officer Martinez explained. "When they learn about Duke, they realize change is possible." The Henderson home had become known as Duke's Haven. Their fostering program had successfully rehabilitated and placed 28 Samoyeds, each one learning from Duke's gentle guidance. Emma documented each success story, creating a manual called The Duke Method for working with traumatized dogs. Claire's blog had evolved into a full-fledged nonprofit organization, connecting rescue organizations with resources and training. They hosted monthly workshops where Duke, now a distinguished senior with a completely white face, still participated as the star instructor. "Watch him with the new rescues," Sarah would tell visitors. "He knows exactly what each one needs, whether it's space, play, or just quiet companionship." Duke's influence even reached international levels. A documentary filmmaker from Japan spent 3 months following Duke's daily routine, creating a film called White Angel that won several awards at animal welfare film festivals. But perhaps the most touching tribute came on Duke's 11th rescue anniversary. Emma, now in her 2nd year of veterinary school, organized a special event called Duke's Dreams. The gathering brought together hundreds of dogs and their families, all of them either directly or indirectly saved because of Duke's story. During the event, they unveiled a new wing at Second Chance, the Duke Recovery Center, specializing in rehabilitation for severely traumatized animals. The facility featured innovative healing spaces, including a sensory garden, hydrotherapy pool, and quiet rooms with heated floors, all inspired by what they'd learned from Duke's journey. "Every dog we save," Emma said during the dedication ceremony, "carries a piece of Duke's spirit forward." Duke himself, now moving more slowly but still radiating gentle wisdom, attended the ceremony wearing his therapy vest adorned with numerous service medals and awards. He sat proudly beside Emma as she spoke, occasionally greeting well-wishers with his characteristic soft head bumps. That evening, as the celebration wound down, Sarah found Duke and Emma in their usual spot in the garden. Despite his age, Duke still insisted on their nightly ritual listening to The Little Prince. His beloved polar bear toy, now well-worn but carefully preserved, by his side. "You know what amazes me most?" Emma said to Sarah, gently stroking Duke's ear. "He never forgot how to love. Despite everything humans did to him, he never stopped believing in goodness." Sarah watched as Duke dozed peacefully, his head in Emma's lap. The setting sun caught his white fur, creating a soft halo effect that seemed fitting for a dog who had become an angel to so many. "That's his real legacy," Sarah replied softly. "Not just the laws or the programs, but the simple truth he taught us all, that love is always worth the risk." As if agreeing, Duke let out a gentle woo-woo and snuggled closer to Emma. Above them, the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, each one seeming to represent a life touched by the remarkable journey of a white dog who refused to let darkness win. In the years to come, countless more stories would be added to Duke's legacy. But for now, in this peaceful garden moment, surrounded by love and trust, Duke's greatest teaching was clear. Sometimes the most wounded souls become the greatest healers, and the deepest scars can lead to the most beautiful transformations. For in Duke's world, every day was a chance to turn pain into purpose, fear into hope, and tragedy into triumph. And in doing so, he showed us all what it truly means to not just survive, but to thrive and help others do the same.